Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Williams. Today I'm joined with Eric Robertson, the owner of NRD Landscaping out of Minnetonka, Minnesota. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. As you know, on the podcast, we talk a little bit about business and or a lot about business, a lot about kind of the origin stories, but yours and I's are kind of unique of how we met and maybe from your point of view. So you obviously own a landscaping company.
I do.
And why don't you tell people how we met? Because I'd love to give my version of how I came to meet you as well, but this one's a little unique.
Yeah, it is different. It seemed corny at the time, but I'm glad it worked out. My grandfather was a very important figure in my life growing up, and he lived in Wayzata. Mm-hmm. So whenever I was in the area and had 5-10 minutes early running to a meeting, I would always just drive by, go down memory lane, go visit his house. He hadn't obviously passed away and hadn't lived there anymore, but I pulled around the corner like I have done 30, 40 times, and I see the house is basically gutted down to the studs, a new house being built, and your sign.
Yep.
And I thought, if I just had an opportunity just to do a little bit of landscaping, no matter what it is, to that house, that'd be pretty cool, right?
It'd be a cool story.
Kind of a closure for my grandfather and
right.
And I called thankfully you had a yard sign out.
Yep.
Because I had no idea.
I'm very big on my yard signs.
Yeah.
It's like funny, it's a little tangent on yard signs. Like everyone has their pet peeves. And one of my biggest ones, and always has been, is my sign. I can't stand it if it's crooked, if it's dirty, if it's not in the right location where you can see it. Sometimes like on a long street, I want it sideways so you can see it both ways. Sometimes it's back. And my number one pet peeve is if a project manager or somebody moves my sign next to a Biffy, or if the Biffy guy puts the porta potty
right next to
my
your
sign, it absolutely drives me bananas.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
and we don't want to come a lean-to, like guys will lean shovels on it and tools on it.
Yes,
that's a pet peeve of mine as
well.
It
is.
So.
Nope, I don't. We spend a lot of money on our signage, and we
That's
don't
right.
look good. So anyway, it worked.
It worked. I called you, left this really corny message about seriously, we're both professionals at this point. I'm leaving this total stranger a message about my grandfather and wanted to work on this house. And you called back. Yep. I couldn't believe you called back the same day, which is rare. I've called builders many a times and have never gotten a call back.
Yep.
And boom, that day you had me over at one of your parade homes a week or two later, just for a in-person introduction.
Yep.
And I've literally been working together since, right?
Yeah, it has been. Yeah. So it's interesting, another little side tangent here. One of my MOs is just time is valuable, right? And we do, luckily have a very beautiful product. A lot of people want to work with us. We're very fortunate that we feel that way, and we have just tremendous trade partners that we do partner with. But a lot of times I get a lot of interest from new people. And I was in sales. I still am in sales. And so I always am sensitive to returning somebody's phone call, returning an email. But there's only so much time in a day. You can only meet with so many people. So it's funny that, because I still do that now, that if someone is really serious about meeting, and I'll usually defer it. Sometimes it's a couple months. I'll say, you know what? I can't meet with you right now. But I have a parade coming up. Why don't you please stop in while I'm during the parade, right? So I know where I'm going to be. I don't have to set up a separate schedule.
It's time. Perfect.
And they can see our home, but you can't replace, obviously, a phone call. In-person interaction is extremely important to me. Anyway, so that's funny. So he came by, and so from my point of view, I've been building for 18 years. That home I think we built was 2015, 16, 17, 17
right.
Somewhere 17, in 17.
Maybe.
So we've been working together 5-6 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
And for a long time in my career, landscaping was probably something that I personally didn't value enough. And it could have been at the strata of the homes that I was building. Now, I would say the last 10 years, as the architecture and where our clients have taken our craft and what we're producing, I've become very huge supporter of landscaping architecture, in that it reinforces and supports the architecture of the home. And it's almost like if you went into a home that had no furniture, if you've ever been to an artisan home tour or parade of homes, like the styling,
critical.
It's critical. That's what gives the feeling. The home, you can build a gorgeous home, but if it's styled terribly or just has really bad furniture or it just doesn't feel, that's the feeling.
Yeah, then it's not translating.
It's not.
The finished product's not translating to you.
But I would argue that landscaping does that for the architecture of the house. And while sometimes it pretty much on every project is very hard. We'll get into that later of how clients budget for landscaping. Do they value budget? But going back to the origin of how we met it wasn't something I put a big value in myself. So it wasn't something I sold to my clients. So i.e. they didn't really believe in it that much either. And so I've worked with landscapers, it was the classic out of the back of their truck with a shovel, not on time, never got anything done. Didn't, you got what you paid for, right?
Yeah.
And then I've been on the other end where, I've worked with some of the most expensive companies, in the state. And it was like, wow, that is just ridiculously expensive, and that was hard. So I never
It's
felt,
hard to find that value.
I never felt like, because I feel like what we produce as a company at Mark D. Williams Custom Homes is a very high end, home. But and it's a value statement. I mean, these are, what you value may be different than what I value. Maybe we're a good fit, maybe we're not. But we do an extremely high crafted home. And when somebody comes to us and says, we want this to be a good value, I want every trade partner to also reinforce those values from our trim, the things that are more celebrated, right? It would be the cabinetry, the trim, the lighting, the tile, things that people touch.
The fun things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But landscaping, we couldn't find that trade partner that aligned with us. And then in walks you, and you've been it. You've been kind of just the eye on the dot on the I and the cross on the T for us. And what was funny is we're both Chaska grads.
Go Hawks.
Right? Go Hawks. I was 99. You were 91. And it wasn't for a year or two later that we found out about that, right?
At least 2
years. And I forget, because a lot of my trade partners are from Chaska, not by any choice, but just a lot. There's the western suburbs in that area just put out a lot of strong business owners and trade partners.
It started coming together when the first time you invited me on the boat cruise, like to celebrate the subs. Yep. It was my first time, and a lot of the other subs, it was not their first time. So I'm the new guy in the room, right?
Yep.
Or on the boat. And I'm walking around trying to talk to people, and I'm like slowly realizing, oh, you're from Chaska. Oh, you're from Chaska. I'm thinking in my head, I'm from Chaska. What is it? This is a small world, right?
Right.
Not
You're
really.
right. That was on the boat. I forgot that was on the boat. And I met your wife that time. And so anyway, it was funny because I've often used that, like, hey, if you're a Hawk, you're in front of the line, and just kind of an odd coincidence, but given the nostalgia towards your grandpa, and doesn't seem far fetched that it was kind of meant to be. And we've had a great relationship ever since.
Couldn't agree. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Going on to the business side of things, I don't actually know this story, which is one of the fun reasons to have people on the podcast, is to really sit down and understand how you created your business and how you operate it. How did you start a landscaping company? Why did you start a landscaping company? And walk me through the kind of the maturation of where you're at today.
Sure. If I run long, make sure you squeeze it down.
I got you down.
Out of high school, in high school, I was working at a lawn and landscape company, very traditional. They do the lawn mowing, the maintenance, and then the landscaping side. Very, very traditional company. Yep. And I was a kid. It was to make money, right? Yep. There was no real love there for it. When I left for college, I got accepted to a college in Connecticut for oceanography, of all things.
Oceanography?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that is super cool. It's like Dirk Pitt from Clive Cussler novels. Big fan.
So I moved. I moved out to Connecticut, and I came from a single mother raising a few kids, and I had to pay my way, right? I went to school and had to get a job to pay for my existence while I was in college.
Right. And
really the only skill I had that I could find real quick was landscaping. So I got turned on out there to a company called McDonald and Painter Associates, and it was a design build firm. It was husband and wife, and they brought me on. It was a 4-person team, and within, I'd say, 3 months, it went from just a grunt to a bit of a connection, right? So he started allowing me to kind of get involved in the design side of it. He was a landscape architect.
Landscape architecture.
Yep. And what's that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. And we had that sort of bond right out of the gate, and he allowed me. It was super. It was different from what I'd come from. I came from the lawn and landscape, and this was transformative, like where you get input from clients, you take their input, you give them your input, and it was the first time I had seen that as a young man. Like, I can give you some ideas, and we're bouncing them off each other. And he kind of gave me some free reins, and I stayed on, and he kind of taught me the design piece of it. And I had a completely different look at that industry from working with him for a few years. So I had decided, and I was not enamored with the oceanography program. I was pretty young and stupid and didn't quite fully understand what that program really entailed. And I made a decision one fall to sort of bail on the oceanography idea and really pursue what this husband and wife team were doing in a more hands-on design build, initiating with clients and really having that discussion. Came home, because this is home, right? Yep. I loved Connecticut, but I didn't feel like I could start a business there. Yep. Came home and actually started a business with a good friend of mine. It was a partnership in the beginning.
Okay.
And we did that for a few years. His life changed course, and we sort of diverted from a larger scale maintenance and landscaping, and just I focused on the core, which was design. And that's kind of where it took off, yeah.
And what were some of your first clients? I mean, when you come back and you start a company, I mean, I think some of the people listening, they either have a company, but maybe there's someone that wants to start a company. I mean, what was,
Believe it or not, we were still fairly young, just out of college age, and zero startup money, no loans or anything like that.
Right.
And it was literally driving around with flyers that we designed on our little computer and printed and putting them in mailbox holders.
Yep.
And grabbing a few clients here and there, and then just killing it, doing a really, really good job, and letting that spread. So we'd get a job in a neighborhood that was fairly new.
Mm-hmm. Like what, like Bear Path, or like, that's too nice?
No, in Chaska, though, honestly.
Chaska?
Yeah,
okay.
some of
like
our
where?
first projects, Weston Ridge.
Yeah.
You know where that is?
Sure I do.
So that was like when it was fairly new.
Okay.
So we went in there and did one really good project, and within the end of that year, we're probably doing 4 right in that neighborhood.
I think, would you say that landscaping is very word of mouth referral based? Like you'll kind of like drop a pebble in the water and you'll see the ripples spread. I mean, if you let's say you go on a cul-de-sac and you see a landscape sign go up and you're doing landscaping, some patios, and all of a sudden now some of the neighbors will call, like we're building, it's less so, right? Like if I'm building a new home, unless there's vacant land next door, it's like, it's unlikely that someone's going to call me and say, hey, I want to tear my house down right next to the house that you're building. It can happen, but it's not as common.
Yeah. It was more so that way earlier in my career than it is right now.
Yeah.
So I think it would be safe to say if you're doing really simple, easy to digest projects that kind of everyone needs in the area where they need it, there's a ripple effect.
Okay.
When you get onto a bit more involved, more thought through entire renovations of properties, it's less. The ripple effect is less, for sure.
Interesting. So I think I mentioned this before we came on. My first job was also a air quote for those who are not watching this on YouTube, landscaper. And I think one of the questions I want to touch base is what are some of the misconceptions with landscaping, right? Landscape architecture, I already referenced someone who was, picking a shovel out of the ground. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's interesting, like what people perceive. And I don't think a lot of people know, like city planners, civil engineers, civil planning. I have a friend of mine who, in Milwaukee, and he does, landscape architecture for, the city and for the county. And like they're doing massive projects that are, way beyond my understanding of even talk about, but more in your realm of like, there's a lot that goes into this that I think the average person doesn't understand. I think people can appreciate the beauty of and a lot of times you don't see the beauty of it till years later, right? A very simple thing is, back, let's say, use Chaska as an example. And, my dad built homes for 30 years and you'd have, Francesca Court or, Romeo Court. I mean, I remember all these street names, and the developer would often ask the builders, what do they want to name it after? My sister's name was Ashley. There's a number of Ashley Lanes and Ashley whatever. But there is no Mark Street. So evidently Mark Street was not, I was not allowed to have my name on a street, which is fine. And Ashley's Court sounds much nicer.
It does.
But the point of it is they would plant these little maple trees, right? Well, if you drive there now, 20, 30 years later, I mean, these trees are enormous.
Isn't it cool? Yeah.
And it is now. The development looks totally different.
Yeah.
And so, you can be glad for some foresight in some of your landscaping and trees. I think they call the city of Minneapolis, where I live, like, sometimes it's referred to as like the city of trees, or, when you fly over it, I mean, you can't actually see all the homes there. It's just trees everywhere,
unique.
Which is impressive.
It is.
Because a lot of cities are not like that.
And that is one of the coolest things. I love going back to projects we did 10, 12, 15 years ago. And I mean, really, because there's no other way to get that gratification than to physically go by and look at it. And that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. How would you, so going back to that earlier part then, so my first job, I remember you mentioned on your printer, so I think I must have been able to drive. And so I suppose I was 16, and I had I remember it was bright fluorescent neon green sign, or cards. And it was a professional lawn care service and just my name and my phone number. And I would just go door to door, and I would just knock on people's doors. And I just thought that's what you did. And
right.
And so that's
all
what
you could do.
I didn't even do a flyer. I was like, mailbox? No, I'm going straight to the door. And so
and putting the word professional on it.
Yeah, professional, right? Turns out the definition of professional is just if someone pays you for a service, you are professional. So anyway, obviously, like most kids, you end up mowing your own yard. So I had been paid. So technically, I was a professional.
Correct.
I don't know that marketing two-step now that I wish I would have known then. But anyway, so I got a couple of bigger yards, and you would laugh at this. I didn't do hourly. I shot for the moon. I'd be like, and I was better off with bigger yards. So we had a big lawnmower at the time because we had some acreage at our personal home that I grew up on, and so I'd do the neighbors, and before you know it, you've got 10 clients. But these are several acres. I mean, it takes days to do all these. So that's all I really needed.
Just like a push mower?
No, like a zero turn rate. It was a standing one, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And and so anyway, we had 10, and I remember having my little carbon copy paper book where I'd write my bill of invoice, and obviously how you track your expenses and things like that, or not so much expenses, but just the bill to the client. You'd leave it there, and they'd pay you cash or usually a check. And but it was funny, as years later, as I got into college, I tried to expand the business, not with more people, but mainly just trying to take on smaller yards. Well, a big acreage yard, you can just floor it, right? And maybe your lawnmower goes 15, 20 miles an hour.
Less finesse.
Yeah, less finesse. Well, these small yards, I mean, I could do them in about 5 minutes, but here was the problem. I was going 20 miles an hour. I mean, I was just tearing up the yards.
Yeah.
And I got fired. I only got fired from one job, and I should have been fired because it had a low dip on it, and you needed a hand mower, and I just went right over the top, and I skimmed the top off of both of them, and it just took them all out.
Regrading.
And I think I probably had the audacity to tell the homeowner that, well, your yard wasn't level, so it's not my fault. I don't think I said that. He was a really nice guy, and but he should have fired me, and he did. So that was
lesson learned.
Don't go so fast on a big lawnmower in a small yard. But anyway, that was my introduction.
And details matter. That probably carried along with you in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely didn't do that again.
Correct.
So
you learn from your mistake.
Yeah. And I remember because I had a little yellow Walkman, and I used to listen to Louis L'Amour book tapes nonstop.
Really?
Oh, I could probably verbatim tell you any Louis L'Amour story you want to know right now. I mean, for 7 or 8 years, all I listened to. So I put my ear pods in, or sorry, they didn't have ear pods then.
Right.
I had a Walkman headset. I put it in, then I'd take noise, or just like big headphones to make sure
stop the noise. Yeah.
And I'd put that over it. And I remember my ears used to hurt after about an hour because of the pressure on your ear. But
wow,
I loved that was my land. So anyway, I actually sold my business before I went into college. Yeah, I want to say I sold it for maybe $10,000. It was basically just, hey, here's my book of business. Here's my clients. Give you a warm referral, and you can take over their accounts. And
wow, that's impressive. That was my age. You sold your business.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there was no really official.
And blue sky.
Yeah, blue sky. So anyway, well, enough about that. How much of your work is directly to consumers, or business to to people versus B2B like me? So our relationship, obviously, is I'm a business. Walk me through where in the beginning, obviously, it was straight to the client, but where are you at now?
Yeah, we land about 80-20. So 20% of our revenue is business to business, working with builders and remodelers. 80 is direct. One of our designers works directly with a customer.
Yep.
And well, that's it, 80-20.
And those clients, how are they finding you?
A mixture. Marketing has always been a stumbling point for me. It's really try a bunch of things and see what works, right? Over the years. And this is 20 plus years now. Wow. So I would say, I mean, what we're doing is a mix of pay-per-click ad, Google ads, display ads. Some seasons we do print marketing, and then sometimes we do card decking, which is your postcard in with 30 others in a RSVP type pack.
Yep.
Word of mouth, and right now that's about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And do you work with a marketing company, or do you just do that kind of in-house? Do you kind of
in-house?
Yep.
I'll lean on a company to help with the graphic piece of it,
delivery.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
What have you found to be the most successful? And has it changed I assume it's changed a lot over the 20 years.
Well, it
didn't have Google Click Ads.
It didn't have Google. Yeah. Right now, Google is our most dominant form of return in lead generation. But we didn't have that when we started. So in the beginning, it was print. Print was king for us because it's also a visual, right? When you can deliver something that has a little bit of an image of one snapshot of something you've done, it sparks someone's interest more than just a text line on a computer, right?
Right.
But print started going down, so we got into trade shows. That was one I kind of forgot to mention.
Yeah.
Trade shows, I've been doing those for better part of 8 to 9 years now. And now that that started strong, just like print did. Print kind of escalated for me, plateaued, and just started to go down. Trade shows have done the same thing. They started off like just so impactful to my business. Like they would just generate, more than half of my leads in an entire year.
And this would be like home and garden shows, local shows?
Both.
Like where would these be?
Home and garden show. We did the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show. Still are, actually. And then we've tried smaller neighborhood shows like the Southwest Metro show, or that they're held in. Like,
I've done a few of those, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not doing any of those right now.
Right.
But I actually like them.
Yeah.
They're low impact on the labor side and the cost side.
Yep.
They're easy to get in. They're quick to set up. They're inexpensive. So the return that you need on it is so.
I mean, if
much
you get
less.
one job,
you're
good. And then, where you can
versus
go
the home and garden show we do a 2,000 square foot display.
Wow.
So it's a week build, right? So there's a lot of upfront cost, labor cost, material. You're getting materials in the middle of the winter, which is not fun.
Right.
But it's a risk reward. You're trying to get that.
How long is I've actually never been to the home garden show.
It's a Thursday through Sunday.
Okay.
That's it.
And when you say you have 2,000 square feet, are these hardscapes? Are these patios? Are these fire pits? I mean, what are you
What we're
displaying?
trying to do is take this year it's 50 by 50.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bigger than that. So, and we're trying to encapsulate some of the more common features or elements that we do. So we'll have paving, concrete pavers, natural stone. We'll have usually a water element, a fire element, a carpentry element. Because you have to sort of stand out, right? So we'll have some type of pergola or beam arbor, that type of thing.
Yep.
Outdoor kitchens are big for us.
Yep.
So we'll have something like that. We're just trying to create this one little, like your parade home. You can walk in and show them the home.
Yep.
They can walk into this display and literally walk through it, touch it, talk to people.
You're making it relatable, where people can say, I want this or a portion of this on my property.
Yeah.
Can we set up a time to talk with you?
Yes. And talk to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. We were right there. We're talking to them face to face, shaking hands, and they're getting to know us a little bit better. So that's a good show for us right now.
Mm-hmm. What kind of entry fee, does it take to get into that?
It depends on they go for everything from that I believe is, I think it's 10 by 10 is the smallest.
Yep.
And I don't really know the costs of it, but.
And would they have pretty good competition? How many of your peers and competitors would be at a show like that?
So it takes up the entire convention center.
Yeah. So a lot.
A lot. Well, I don't know. It what my space is called a feature garden. So in the middle of the show, there's feature gardens and a idea home, right? So those larger gardens are given to seven or 8 companies.
Yeah.
And then outside in the flanking halls, there are the 10 by 10, 10 by 20s, 10 by 40s. So there might be 20 companies in the show.
Right. That you would compete against or be vying for the same client, you're saying. But you have a lot of vendors. There'd be like a paver manufacturer. There'd be all the suppliers that you would maybe even buy from or network from. They would be also at this show?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The vendor will be they'll be there because Hedberg's there.
Understood.
Or, Rockhard is there, a wholesaler, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to get back to an earlier question that we kind of tangented away from, but what are some of the misconceptions that you find that you either have to combat around landscaping, and especially landscape architecture? Just because it's kind of a bigger question, and obviously this is your profession and your field, but I assume you've faced this before, either at career day when you're explaining to your kids at some point, like what their dad does, or you have a 20-year career, so you're clearly doing something right. To run a business, in some ways, it's like regardless of what the business is, if you're doing it for 20 years, you've got something figured out.
Sure.
So, what are some of the misconceptions that people associate landscaping and landscape architecture?
Right out of the bat, we've mentioned it actually already today. The biggest misconception is how vague the word landscaping is.
Okay.
Everyone has a different meaning for landscaping. That can mean lawn care.
Mm-hmm.
That can be trimming the bushes. That can be maintenance, snow removal, all that kind of thing. To us, it means a very different or very specific, right? We are talking about the exterior enhancement of your home. Like we look at the landscape when we're trying to provide a landscape to somebody, it is a direct relation to their home. Mm-hmm. We're trying to accentuate their life outside. We've even ran ads or ran sort of themed concepts of home outside because the home is very important to people. Mm-hmm. And we feel like the landscape piece that we're looking at and trying to achieve is really just replicating some of the joy you get out of the inside parts of your home outside, and to take advantage of it. So to be lumped into landscaping, where
it's too broad of a
we're
term.
fielding calls for grass clipping removal.
Yep.
And we're looking at
do you do those services or
no.
So you just give them a recommendation or say, I'm sorry, we don't do that.
Yeah. If I have a recommendation, I'll give it to them. But
right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And from a design standpoint, I mean, your day-to-day operations, how much time are you spending, designing? Are you mostly the point man for sales? Like, walk us through, not a day, but like a week.
Yeah.
Like, what would be, like, obviously I know Chris, for those that don't know Chris, he's basically like a Norwegian version of The Rock.
Yeah,
He's this massive individual. He's like 6'5", bald, chrome dome, can probably bench press your car, and he's got this great chuckle. Every time I see him I see him sometimes at the fitness club, and he'll be eating like, a pound of sushi, just straight protein.
I know.
And he's got just this, but he's funny because all my kids love him. When you guys landscaped our home,
he has like this,
he's got this real warm,
effervescence,
easy, he's just an amazing person. I forget how we got on describing Chris exactly.
A week.
Yeah, what is your week? I mean, I know Chris often comes out. He'll be the point man for his crew. He runs
that crew.
For those listening, he runs your hardscape crews, correct?
One of them.
One of them.
Yep.
How many hardscape? I mean, do you have multiple crews?
5.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yep.
I had no idea that was that many.
Because whichever one has its right fit, right?
Yep.
Or we try to.
Yep.
And you've mostly been working with Chris's crew.
I see.
But there are 5, and then some ancillary crews like carpentry, masonry, like those types of things.
Yep.
So to get back on your design, how much time do I spend on design? Lately, and this is the direction I want to go, is there's 3 designers, right? And I want them to have access to me in terms of collaborating in the office, of talking through a design, thinking about how to do something a little bit better, and sort of being that like a team effort. I love that piece of it, rather than just shoving yourself in your own desk in your corner and trying to achieve this thing, right? Yep. I like the collaboration piece of it. So there's a little bit of that. There's a bit of where I'm actually doing some CAD work and design. And then it's balanced with a ton of on-site, heading out to the job sites. That's a super important thing to me, is to be at least hitting these sites once a day, just extra eyes, thanking the guys, right? This is sometimes brutal. Like you're dealing with weather and you're dealing with different circumstances.
It's a very difficult. I mean, obviously in Minnesota, right? It's
challenging.
Yes, it's very challenging.
Yeah. So the on-site piece to me is important, and just I'd say the rest of it is just like you getting customer relation, getting back to them, getting emails done when you can, trying to make phone calls, and just sort of really balancing all those three things throughout the week.
I can tell you, outside of a good value and quality work, and your people are amazing, which should be enough if nothing else. But the way you interact with our clients, like I know, while we always try to have someone from our team at all meetings with our clients, I know that our key people, our inner people, somebody like yourself, I fully trust you with our client, which it takes a lot, right? Because you're very just very high-end clientele, and we want them to be heard and listened to, and a lot of value. And I feel like you make them feel very comfortable. And also, I love that when you're meeting with them, both in design but also from a budgeting standpoint, like you're listening to their concerns. I feel like I have never met a client yet that even remotely understands, like, when they pick, I want that pool, I want that fire pit. I don't think I've ever seen anyone get even close to what they actually end up spending. Now, they'll get there because they understand what they see. They start seeing some examples, walk them through the process. But pretty much every single client I've ever sat down with, when we do kind of full landscape architecture, kind of has a, what? How can it be this expensive? Is that just pretty common? I mean, pretty...
It is. I mean, it can be. But you're dealing with somebody who they're building a home.
Yes.
And the landscape is just another component they're going to have to deal with.
Right.
So they will spend, not every time, but a lot of times you'll find clients like your clients. They want the fun things. They're on Houzz, or they're online. They see the fire feature, or they see the water thing, the outdoor kitchen, right? But oftentimes you need retaining walls, you need
Right.
soil corrections, grading.
The rain gardens that these cities
rain
want you to do.
gardens. You need an irrigation system. You need grass, right? All of these other big sort of chunk items take away from
the overall
budget. They want the fun stuff.
That's funny you say that. That's exactly right. So we're working on a project together right now, and after we presented, the homeowner, who I know pretty well, called me, and she's like, "Why in the world would I pay $21,000 for irrigation?" I'm like, "Well, do you want a green yard? And by the way, you have like 6 acres.
It's huge.
Yeah, your site is massive."
Yes.
And she asked my project manager before she talked to me. She's like, "Steve, what would you do here?" He's like, "Well, I like green grass." And I thought his answer was
You have a lot of it.
It was so funny. And so even today when we were on site, I was walking her through like, well, it just needs an explanation. Again, I think this is why relationships are so important, not only with your trade partners, but also, it's important that the client can trust the person that's working on the job as well. And that they're getting the similar, they're getting reinforcement both from the design team, from the building team, as well as, our trade partner. And so I think once you kind of show them and help them understand, make it their choice, because we can certainly dial it back.
Yeah.
It's just if you want that fun, whatever it is, the pool. So, we worked. Yeah.
And let's not forget, right? We are in the middle of our material and labor has never been higher in my 20 plus years.
Yep.
And it jumped so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There are products that are literally double the cost of what they were a year and a half ago.
Right.
And they're seeing those products used in some of our portfolio pictures.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough deal, but that's the reality. Is labor is artificially high right now, and some of the materials are getting out of control.
Do you think labor will come down? And
I do. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
I've always kind of told people that, like, hey, if you have an electrician and let's say, I don't know what they pay their journeyman, but let's just say you pay them $40-$50 an hour, 30, I don't know what they pay them. Once you give that guy a pay raise, I can imagine like a year later saying like, oh, we're actually gonna cut you back to, $5 less an hour.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that once labor goes up, it sort of stays up, and that materials are commodities. Is that not true in landscaping?
It is to a degree. Where the labor will come down is the laborers.
Yeah.
So they're generally, and everyone maybe does their landscape company a little differently, but a crew will generally have a certain number of general laborers.
Mm-hmm.
More unskilled. They're
Yep.
there for the basic tasks, digging, wheelbarrowing, moving things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then they'll have a mid-tier sort of second-tier guy under the foreman and a foreman,
Yep.
right, or project manager foreman.
Yep.
Those will not be coming down. The cost for those. It's the general laborers.
Understood.
They sort of went through an area or a period where they could kind of demand more, and because of the appetite of the consumer, everyone needed bodies. Everyone needed work or workers.
Yep.
I do feel like that entry level position
Mm-hmm.
will come back down to a more normal.
And
price.
what about, I've asked this to everyone on the show. It seems like, everyone in the world obviously has a pretty good understanding that things are delayed, slower, more expensive, and now we have inflation as well. What are you seeing as far as product timelines, let's say to pre-COVID? So if I was to order a bunch of pavers, for instance, what would that lead time be compared to what it was previously?
If it's not custom made material, so if it's a paver that's in their catalog, nothing's changed about it. That has gotten almost back to normal.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
halfway through this season, it really became normalized again.
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me that a year ago, I wouldn't even be able to confidently tell you
When it would come.
Yeah, and now if you give them 2 to 2.5 weeks, you should be okay.
Yep.
And it depends on what product you're picking. There are
Yep.
products that are not stocked in Minnesota, so there is some shipping time, but it's not like the months and months. Custom fabrication is still fairly long lead times though.
And why is that? Are they getting just an influx of people that want custom materials?
Demand.
Yeah.
Yep. Demand, and there's just not a lot of places that can custom fabricate, stone products.
Mm-hmm. And walk us through that for those that wouldn't know what that is. So are they milling a slab down? Are they water cutting it? Are they
all the above?
All the everything.
Yeah. So a good example would be, let's say we're doing a pool that has a curve to it, and the pool needs a coping.
Yep.
Well, rather than just sort of Lego or like have these straight cuts forming this curve, we would have that curve templated, and then that template would be made, custom made, fabricated piece of stone out of that. so that it fits the curve exact.
Wow.
Right.
Yep.
And it's a really high level finishing touch, but that takes a lot of time because there are not, 12 vendors in the Twin Cities who do that.
Right.
So as the demand comes up for these sort of elevated products, the lead time just grows.
Wow.
Yeah.
How from a from a subcontractor and employee base, I assume every landscape, depending on their size, I mean, do you have a mix of both?
Yes.
And what's kind of the pros and cons of having, let's say, your own employees versus, having some, trade partners that you can rely on?
Yeah. When I started, it was pure employee.
Yep.
More traditional way. And it has been merging to subcontractors with like in-house employees that deal with management or design. The reason I like this model is it allows me not to sacrifice on a component. So if we need masonry on a job, I don't want to have to depend on my one employee who's pretty good at masonry to have him there to do that. I would rather get the best mason to provide that service that one time on that project rather than carry that person and rarely use his skill, right? And it's the same if you think about, because a lot of our projects, I like the projects that involve multiple facets, some carpentry, some masonry, some hardscaping, some softscaping, somebody who really knows how to treat plants and how to prune them before they even plant them and sort of really tailor each component of it. And I've just found it's easier to do that when you find partners that are really good at their craft.
Right.
And then employ them that way when you need them.
It's similar to building a home.
It's exactly like it,
right?
in my opinion.
You have the framer obviously is doing the shell of the home. You have the interior trim carpenter who's doing the detailed work, cabinetry, painting, and so on and so forth. I mean, each one has their unique skill set.
Yeah,
I think going back to your word before about landscaping is such a general term, someone would say, hey, that landscaper can do it all. Well, there's specialization. I think that needs to be educated to people so they understand it better.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, even being in the industry, I would say I'm late to the understanding, and that could be just because I'm dim. But but maybe it's interesting, and I don't think there's a lot of industries that need to do a better job of educating their clientele. And let me ask you this question: so you have an 80-20 to people over businesses.
Yeah.
Do you do any commercial accounts, or would that be?
No. From time to time. The only commercial work we do is when we have a client that we did their home and they own a business and we go do something at their business.
Yep.
But no, that is...
And that almost seems more like service. I mean, it would most...
Yeah.
Hey, take care of, this giant,
Well, and commercial
piece.
Landscaping in large part is really sort of not what it's not creative based.
Right.
It is, we need 1,000 shrubs and 50 trees planted,
right.
And this is what was called out on the plan. I'll stuff them in the ground and move on.
Right.
And then to each their own, right? There's a value there to getting that done. It's just not it's not our goals.
One, if it's like a big warehouse, you could say
Yeah.
hey, if I was the owner of a warehouse, do I really want to spend, I obviously don't need a pool at my warehouse. I'm storing boxes there.
No, they're just doing what the municipality is making them do.
Right.
So they don't even want you there. They're being forced to do it.
Right. And you're definitely doing irrigation because they want their yards to be green. Actually, maybe not. Maybe they don't want them to grow at all. That's funny. How do you guys handle the winter? So I've heard of companies where, hey, if your employees have to lay you off, they seek other jobs. Sometimes these people, they'll do either unemployment or they'll do, if your service work, maybe that transfers into plowing.
Yeah.
Walk me through educate us how a landscape company navigates the winter, especially Minnesota, right? I mean, from this year, I assume once it snows, you're pretty much done, or not necessarily.
Accommodate once the ground starts to freeze and materials that you're using aren't very easy to work with anymore,
right?
For a longer period of time, then you're done.
Right.
I can only speak for me. I mean, then that's when we're done.
Yep.
This year came early, unfortunately, because there's also, let's say it gets really unseasonably cold for 3 weeks, and then boom, it's 45 degrees,
like it is today.
One
day.
Unfortunately, we don't have guys for 3 weeks sitting waiting.
Right.
We're they're getting laid off. They're going to find winter work. A lot of them move inside and do demo work or drywall work or painting work. It's just something in the trades to stay busy. Some go on unemployment.
Yep.
But that is the knee jerk of it's warm, come back.
Right.
it doesn't work like that for
I
us.
well,
but, yeah.
I know that, but it's good for people to hear that.
It is. No, it is. And some companies are the opposite. They are keeping their guys with winter service work, plowing,
Yep.
maintenance, and they do have that flexibility to jump back to a job because those guys are just sitting in the shop, right? We don't do any winter maintenance. We don't do any plowing. I hate shoveling my own sidewalk. I am not going to do somebody else's
That's so
at
funny.
2 a.m.
Right.
And it's not a knowledge that I have. you
Right.
know? And it's an equipment based business, and I don't really have a whole equipment love.
Right.
I'm not.
Would you actually? I don't know this. I mean, I've obviously been to your office for design,
Mhm.
and I've seen that in Minnetonka, right off of 101 and Highway 7 there. But where do you have a yard, if they will, or where do you keep all your equipment?
It's a commercial space. It's
a
not a
commercial
yard.
space.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's still some need for it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The winter staffing is assistants, designers,
Mm-hmm.
project manager.
And so, like right now, so I assume as you're kind of reloading for 2023, talk
Yep.
to us a little bit about how does your marketing campaign, how does your design work? Obviously, I assume you have more. Maybe this is wrong. They always say you're either busy being busy or busy trying to get busy.
Mm.
I assume right now as you transition into trying to allocate stuff for 2023, I mean, somebody like me who is a longstanding client of yours, you know, I have 2 homes. We've done some preliminary design,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
know those are coming up.
Yes.
So walk me through a little bit of like scheduling. How do you know how many jobs to pick up? Where do you put them in the schedule? Because of course, everybody wants to be
first, I know.
which not everybody can be first.
Not everyone can be first.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate getting the work in design work done this winter?
Mhm.
Can you order materials? Can you kind of get stuff, but you don't want to hold on to them? Walk me through this transition period of winter.
So we switched to a completely the design side is just working on designs,
Mhm.
right, for 2023 projects, and we have a bunch of them in the hopper that from people who reached out last summer, who knew they were planning for next year. Maybe they're building or just built, and they're trying to get sort of that part of it facilitated,
Mm-hmm.
or late fall. My biggest pet peeve in Minnesota, I swear, is everyone wants to be first.
Yeah.
And no one reaches out in the middle of the winter to work on design. When you have your designer's undivided attention,
Right.
you have nothing but time, and you can just fine tune this thing throughout the winter. They will call in April,
Right.
early May, and want to be in the list in June, right? Yeah. So, and I have tried marketing to people in the winter in Minnesota. No one is interested, in my experience,
Right.
in talking about landscaping when it's snow covered in ice.
I mean, it's similar in building, right? So, we have the spring parade of homes, which is usually the month of March. And we always say, even like in real estate, they always say the spring. And I think, people mostly would think of spring of April and May, right?
Yeah.
But I think when it terms like building specifically, I would say the second to third week of February, the phones are going to ring off the hook. Every single year. When I say off the hook, I mean, I don't even have a phone on the hook anymore, so it's my cell phone. my rotary phone booth, down at the street is broken. But anyway, just you get a really nice day. You get a 40-degree day. It's been negative 20 for a month in January, and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Oh man, I got to build a house. It's warm. I got to get going if I'm getting the spring."
Really?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
With house building too.
Oh yeah, house building is.
See, I didn't know that. I was gonna.
But to your exact point and here's the deal. Okay, I can get you in design, no problem. It's gonna take you 3-4 months in design, a couple months in permit selections. We'll be lucky to start the house in the summer or fall of 23.
Yeah.
And so and we have a number of people. We just signed a bunch of design contracts here even this last fall, and it's not aggressive or lax. It's just really that's about the right time to do it, because now we can let this process of meeting on the front end. No one ever talks of. Everyone always wants to know how long will this project take. Meaning the day for building, do I show up? I start excavating from the day they move in. How long is that going to take? Okay, let's say it's 10 months, 14 months. Whatever size your home is, right? But they don't talk about how long it takes on the front end. I mean, design, selections, and now for us personally in our business to combat, delays.
Yeah.
We tried, even on new homes now, we try to pre-order almost everything.
Really?
It's hard
which
to
means
do.
the selections have to be made.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in a perfect world for us, you would design it, you would select it, you would order everything, and then you would start.
Same with us.
Your home would be done faster. Someone described this analogy recently, and I thought it was a great idea. home building, because the process is longer, right? So like the home you and I worked on recently was a 14 to 16 month build, right? And it doesn't mean that everything has to be ordered on day one. Like I get that, right?
Yeah.
That being said, like imagine this, of building an airplane while it's flying. Like,
That's a great analogy.
You're going to feel very uncomfortable. Like, oh, you know what? We're going to be putting on that wing over there. We're like, wait a minute.
And you feel pressured.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Totally. Yeah, we're pressured, we're flying.
Good.
And so, you know, people often wonder, like, why does the price of a home change so much? You know, why are we having, you know, and sometimes we've always been, you know, trying to be people pleasers.
Yeah.
My clients want to move in by the school year or by the summer so they can enjoy the lake. Yep, they have their date in their mind. And, you know, it's not really their fault. They don't know on the front end how much time we take on the front end. I mean, sometimes we had a project that was 6 months to a year just in design. And, you know, as you get into this process and educate the clients, we need to do a better job as an industry as well, is just telling people how much time it takes. And I think people now sort of also know with delays. We're getting a lot of people, especially on remodeling, where they're like, you know, I would say, we'll get you into design, we'll get stuff ordered. I can't even tell you when I'm going to start, but we're going to get it. We'll put you in the queue. And once we have everything selected, then we can tell you when you need to, you know, move out or get a rental. And then we can talk about putting you in the actual schedule.
Yeah. I would like to add on the design piece of it, because we get asked that all the time, right? How long should I expect when we're at a consultation? Because somebody will reach out to us, a designer will meet with them during consultation at their property, talk about what their goals are, kind of what they're looking for, learn a little bit more about them, basically. And then we take that information and we go back and we start designing. And they just, as a consumer, they want to know, you know, what's the approximate timeline am I thinking? And we try and ballpark that timeline. The problem with it is design is creative. Mm-hmm. You can be, I've worked on plans where I've got them designed in my head on the drive home, right? Because there's something that inspired me. I saw it. I get it. I just got to put it on the computer, right? Mm-hmm. There's also times the opposite. You're just blocked. You try 5 different versions and it's not clicking. I don't want to show them the 5th version if I'm not in love with it,
right?
Because they're not going to be, right? It's not going to translate.
Yep.
So that's what's really difficult, putting a timeline on design.
Yes.
It's if I sold widgets, I could go to the warehouse and say, we have 10,000 widgets, you need 9,000.
That's a healthy reminder even for myself in the industry, because I'll often send you an email saying, hey, where are we at with this design? And, you know, I know this with architecture that, you know, sometimes there'll be a couple failed designs that, you know, we don't want to show this to the client because we don't like it.
Exactly.
We're waiting until we love it. That's funny. I guess I always thought you were just a one-off artist. Everything you did was perfect the first time, because oftentimes they'll be like, hey, Eric, where are we at on this designs? And I'll be like, oh, you know, we're still working on it. And I guess I've never really allowed, knowing that I appreciate the craft, I've never really, you know, always allowed enough time to just say, hey, when you're ready.
Right.
You know,
it's not like
us.
I'm going to answer and say, well, where are we at? We're on the 5th version and it sucks. Right? I'm not ready.
Right.
But I guess Tuesday it is.
Right. Oh, that's funny, because I'm big on like dates, especially with trying to, and part of my job, that is part of my job.
Yeah,
and I tell that to the client,
right?
Yep. Hey, here's our milestones. Here's what I'm trying to hit. You know, let's at least check in. And, you know, we have a client meeting, you know, coming up soon here before the holidays, even though we're not going to be doing this till, you know, June, July, you know, of next year or whatever time frame it fits in. But, you know, just so the client also feels like there's some traction. And, you know, I don't feel like we want to wait so long. And this client wants to know her budget more completely.
Yeah, before we even start, which is great.
Yeah. It gives you also more opportunity to design around it. Let's talk a little bit about budget. When people are planning a budget, how do people plan a budget? Do they just say, this is what I want? Do people come to you with a lump sum, and where do they come up with that idea? Like I can say for myself, like I don't even know what it costs. You know, I just say, you know, Eric, these are the things I want. You know, for either a model home or in my case, let's talk about my personal home. Like, hey, I want a little fire feature. I want a pergola. You know, I want a hardscape. Here's my needs that I'm trying to have you solve. And it kind of is what it is. I mean, your pricing is very transparent. It's like you break it down like per section.
Yeah.
And it's very, you know, it's very comfortable. You look at it and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's what it is. And hardscapes always are more expensive than the rest. I assume that's mostly, well, labor and materials, because there's a lot of labor that goes into putting down hardscapes.
Yeah,
correctly.
Yep. Hardscapes are more labor intensive and usually the most expensive piece of the pie, right? They're the foundation of the plan. It's the most important thing to get right. back on your how do you budget, not everyone knows, right? It's because we meet people and they're all different. Some have never landscaped.
Yep.
They don't have any idea what anything costs. And we try and help them through by doing two things. Basically, we'll give them ballpark, like Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you want a patio with a pergola and a fire pit. We'll give them ideas of what past projects with those elements sold at.
And see how they react.
And just see if that's comfortable and have that conversation. And our design order has budget ranges so that we know we want to leave. The designer wants to leave knowing that they've indicated they're comfortable spending this range, so that we don't come back with a plan that took us 3.5 weeks of designing and it comes back 3 times more expensive.
Right.
It could waste everybody's time, right? Then you got to start over.
Yep.
So it's really trying to educate them on what the things that they're looking for cost as best you can, and then being true to that budget. Most people will say we're not the company that's going to come back 3 times more on purpose to oversell it. Right? We're going to try and listen to what you want, because everyone's different. Your dream backyard might be way different than your neighbor's and way different than mine. But I'm not going to push, or we're not going to push as a company what our favorite style or our favorite elements are on you. Yep. We're just going to listen to you and understand what's going to happen, or what's going to make your family happy with your space. And then we'll try and budget based around that.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I had a question and now I can't remember it. We'll have to edit out that long pause there, Ian. And what was I going to ask you there? I know from a clientele standpoint, you had mentioned, 80% were direct to consumers and 20% to builders. Do you like that ratio? Would you like to be 50-50? I mean, what has your experience with builders been like? And do you see that as a field of business you would like to grow?
I do, yeah. So I like where we're at with the people we work with. Nod to you.
Yeah.
And as long as I want to grow the business to business, or working with builders, remodelers, or architects side of our business, as long as it's the right fit.
Yep.
Right. I don't want to grow it just to grow it.
Yep.
I want to be almost another partner.
Yep.
In their process and be their access point to the landscaping side of it. And I don't have an exact ratio in mind.
Yeah.
But I do like the pipeline effect of builders, right?
Yep.
So when you and I have discussions or emails or look at calendars, we can kind of understand what project generally when they're kind of flowing, and it's an ebb and flow thing, right?
Yep.
So the idea for me personally, as our business grows, I'd like to have a more diversity in the builder, architect, remodeler piece of it, so that as it ebbs and flows, I still have that sort of a constant pipeline of work on that piece of it. Because the direct to consumer is very knee jerk. Yep. It is people reaching out to us, a month before they want something.
Right, which is hard to accommodate.
It's super hard. Yeah, it's very difficult to accommodate.
Does that mean that in any business, I assume, answers this next question as yes, it is difficult, cash flow? How do you manage cash flow when you have, let's say, some more stable streams of revenue? When I say stable, just like, in advance, hey, I'm digging the house now. It's going to need landscaping, but you also know that landscaping job isn't going to be due for 8 to 10 months from now, right? So you can kind of forecast out. How do you manage cash flow in landscaping?
It's a good question, especially since we don't a lot of companies manage it by having maintenance contracts. Right,
which makes sense, right?
It makes a ton of sense,
yep.
And it's a struggle for a design build firm until you get enough volume,
yep.
until you get big enough. But it's done for me. It's done through diversity, not having just these massively large projects.
Right.
It's having a certain number of smaller projects that are really in and out quick.
Yep.
And then a step up from that, where you're in a project for a week to 10 days. Well, that's start to finish.
Yep.
Well, that's our cash flow.
Yep.
That is we can get in efficiently, because
yep.
we're all much like you. We want everything to be detailed before the shovel hits the ground,
yep.
so that we can just fit. Because the profitability isn't on certain. It's not like hardscapes are more profitable than softscapes. It's efficiency. How detail oriented. How many mistakes you can sort of not have by being mindful of planning,
yep.
getting in, executing, getting out.
Yep.
That means cash is exchanging that much quicker, right?
Yep.
And just having a happy customer.
You do. So something that really changed how we did things, I don't even know when I started, maybe 10 years ago, where I would meet with a client. I mean, early on in your career, you do a lot of stuff for free. And, as you get older, you say, I don't need the practice anymore.
I love
and
that.
You're a professional, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you go to the dentist and you get, your first couple, cavities or cleanings done and you're like, well, next time I'll pay you for that. I mean, that's just not how it works, right? So I don't know where, I think most entrepreneurs have gone through this where we're hustling and trying to get work for free. Where I'm going with this is like design work. So, when you go meet with the Johnsons, for instance, are you outlining when you talk to them, big budget, saying, hey, here's roughly where I think, how do you present a design contract versus like the actual contract so that that you're not, because it costs you money to have your designers, you're paying them salary or however you're paying them. I mean, that's a real cost to you. How do you handle that?
We have basically three contracts. They're not technically contracts, but we have a design order. So at the consultation, when we're talking budget, the designer will actually present a design order that says exactly what the design process is going to cost.
Oh,
so we don't start measuring properties, shooting elevations, sketch. None of that happens until that component is approved. And that payment is actually a retainer it's the first payment of the installation.
Understood.
And if they decide they're just going to hold off on the installation piece of it, then it was just that fee was for the design. It was
Understood.
just covering the design.
Good. Yep.
And we do that to keep it down. We're not in the business of trying to make a living off selling you a design by charging you a really high price point for the design piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
To us, it's just part of the process.
Yep.
Right? From the design order, it moves into a schedule contract. So when we come back with the first draft, it's usually a concept. You've seen these concept plans. They're full. They're full mature plans they're scaled. They have most of the items called out. Not every detail, not every material choice, not every plant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enough. It's 85, 90% there to see, okay, I like where these guys are going. Yep. The budget is reasonably where we're supposed to be at. The schedule contract is now we don't have to worry about fine-tuning every little what flower color, what type of paver, let's go. And that schedule contract will get them on our calendar.
Because I know it's impressive, the 3D modeling software I find particularly impressive for the clients to see it and visualize it. That usually would happen in kind of that third phase?
Third phase, yep. After the concept. Yeah. And just because we don't want to redo that whole 3D thing again. Right. So that is at the last presentation.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, what do you have that's kind of anything exciting? I know you did an amazing home, a year and a half ago, that pool. You did this amazing pool with a waterfall and lights and water slides. And do you have anything, you said people like the fun stuff. What else is on your radar here coming up?
Some projects with some cool steel work.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm kind of a personal fan of having Corten steel in the landscape.
I do like Corten steel.
And some people get it and some people don't.
Yep.
So we have some fun projects coming up with that. Cooking, for whatever reason, I know it's not water falling into the pool and shooting jets of water.
Right. That was a pretty ridiculous project.
It was pretty ridiculous. It's the projects that are all inclusive of your indoor living outside. Mm-hmm. So it's shade, canopy, pergola, cabana type space, adjacent to a cooking area, adjacent to a family time. I'm a husband and have kids, and I understand completely how much I want to enjoy my time when I'm home, especially in this state, right? The minute it's nice enough to get out there. Right. And I honestly think those projects are exciting. When you're using kind of fun materials and unique, creative ways of using them, that's kind of what we have on the charts right now.
I think the word that comes to mind when you say that is lifestyle. I think both we used to use this a lot when we were designing homes, and probably something we should bring back more in our conversation. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to enhance your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. The home is supposed to fit your needs. We're obviously designing it around you. But I think the landscaping obviously, fits in very nicely, of course, with the architecture of the home. And again, this indoor-outdoor theme has been very prevalent over the last 10 years.
Yes.
Obviously the advance of window technology and these big bifold doors and sliding door technology, even though sometimes, when we have to make sure you're using the right product, especially in our state, a lot of times people bring a photo of, California or Texas, and, they don't have the temperature swings that we do. And so, it's not like you could leave a 40-foot or a 80-foot wall open, but, it's going to be pretty problematic in January.
Yeah.
And I am amazed at how resilient Minnesotans are in the fact that they're so enthusiastic to get outside. And for a big portion of the year, they can't use the space that they're spending money on. Where if you were to go further south, let's say Nashville or kind of the middle of the country, it makes way more sense. Maybe only two seasons or no seasons are you out of your screen porch infrared heaters. And so we've done a lot of projects with you where you've got infrared heaters, you have different heat sources.
Mm-hmm.
We even did one with you where we had the Bluestone and in-floor heat in that screen porch patio on Christmas Lake.
Yep.
And the idea was that you could be out in that screen porch, watch the Super Bowl in January, and you're technically in a screen porch. But we had 3 heat sources: a natural burning fireplace, we had in-floor heat, and we had the infrared heaters.
Yeah, right.
I'm kind of curious to see if you did it. Might have to go over there this January.
I'll bet.
Yeah. Anyway,
but you're right. That they are resilient, and I think we cherish it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're in California and you can use your outdoor space literally throughout the year,
mm-hmm.
I'm guessing it becomes less top of mind,
mm-hmm.
And sort of probably forgotten about.
Yep.
Right.
I think too, when you go over to somebody's house, like we had that thank you dinner that our client threw us over there in Deep Haven, and granted, their home's amazing, their landscaping is incredible, but that night was very special because you're outside, you're in this patio space. It was a gorgeous evening, but it has, like, even now, why am I thinking of that versus other places I've been? There's like this unique thing. It's mirroring the architecture of the home. You're outside and you're in this very
tying it together.
It's tying it together, and it was very enjoyable.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. For people that are listening and want to find you, where can our listeners find you?
www.nrdlandscape.com. We're located in Minnetonka. Phone number 2?
Yeah, well, it'll be all in the show notes as well.
Okay,
and
right.
Obviously you have your Instagram handle at the same NRD. Actually, I meant to ask you, what does NRD stand for?
It's my daughter's initials.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nora. So the N is Nora.
I like that.
Our last name and then design. NRD. Yeah.
I like that. You have a son, though, too, right?
I do.
He got screwed.
Yeah.
What is it? My sister got streets.
Yeah,
your daughter got the company
and the
name,
boy
and the
doesn't
boys get nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, here's a shovel. We'll name the shovel and the wheelbarrow after you.
Yeah.
And
well, unless I start another seasonal business in the winter, it'll be.
He could be service. What's his name?
Andrew.
All right, it's Andrew's snow plowing. Give him a call. Find him on Instagram. And thanks for coming on, Eric. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
All right.